Hello, everyone. We are here back again with yet another episode of Hanger DX podcast, where we talk about everything related to developer experience. And I'm very excited today. We have with us Adrienne. Adrienne joining us. She recently wrote a book on code reviews called Looks Good to Me. And I'm really excited for discussing this topic with Adrienne. Like code reviews is a topic I've also written and talked about quite a lot. So I'm sure like there's going to be a lot of synergies as well as a lot of like things to debate on. So very much looking forward for that, and thank you, Erin, for joining us. Please introduce yourself, and then we'll get straight dive into the topic.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Ankit. Happy to be here. Yeah. I'm Adrienne. I'm a software developer turned developer advocate accidentally. And I currently work at VM as a senior developer advocate where I get to tinker with robots and basically teach everyone else how to do that fairly low code or even no code, but enjoying teaching developers everything that I'm learning at the same time.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about your book, right? Like it's not very common to see developer advocates, people like writing all books all together. So what compels you to write this book?
Uh, yeah, this book it's, I guess it pretty much comes from what you said that it's not common to see books specifically around this topic. And if you try to look right now, there's no one de facto resource on code reviews, right? There's like a few pieces that might go into what to do during the code review or what some best practices are and spread around all over the internet. But there was no one decisive piece that developers could kind of point to and say, yeah, if you want to know about code reviews, like this is the foundation or this is the book, kind of like Code Complete or Clean Code or any of these books that I hope one day my book becomes something like that. But through the network and reputation I've built as a conference speaker and a developer advocate, I was very luckily approached by Manning to write a book. They basically saw a couple of my talks and what I share on LinkedIn and Instagram and my LinkedIn courses. And they're like, hey, if you wanted to write a book on any topic, what would you write about? And I'm like, code reviews. That's definitely the one I want to write about. So that's how it came to be. And of all the experiences I've had and all the developers I've gotten a chance to meet, that was the one thing that kind of bonded us all together. We all had stories and all had complaints and things to share about our code reviews.
That's amazing. So obviously, like, I have written some topics on code reviews as well. I find if you ask any developer in the world whether they're happy with their code review process, you'll probably never hear yes. Uh, so the other thing is also, if you ask 50 developers how one should do code review, you'll get 50 different responses. So
Exactly.
I would love to hear how you think about, you know, like, I mean, from the perspective of the book itself, how kind of like, you summarize those ideas and concepts together. Like, how do we build even like a blueprint on what does a good code review look like? And is it like sort of, is there a way through which we can kind of like make it more universal?
That's a great question. And you're exactly right. There's no one size fits all code review that will apply to every team. I make a very big mention of this in the book because if I were to write a book like that, that book would be it was like be 100 million volumes long, right? To capture every scenario, every team makeup, every type of unique set of constraints that each team has. So what I decided to do instead was really base it off of the team. The team is a very core aspect of how the code review should operate, and it should be because that's kind of the whole point of why you might even do code reviews in the first place. If you're coding by yourself, like sure, you might review your own code. You wouldn't necessarily look at it or go through any kind of review process. You just push straight to main, right? You work on it in isolation. But once you start to introduce other people into the mix, that's why this whole concept is even warranted. So it's very hard to say these are the exact things you need to do. But what I mentioned as a blueprint is to first start with your team and start with what goals do you actually want to accomplish with your code review. So for teams who may not have one all in place already, which is might be unheard of, but you'd be surprised how many teams still don't have any kind of process in place at all. You might start there. What are the bottlenecks that you're seeing? What frustrations do you have in your process that are being missed because you do not have a code review process? And maybe those could be your initial starting goals of not overwriting each other's code, of not doing duplicate work, of making sure knowledge is not siloed between team members. Those could be your starting goals. And then you build a process that kind of helps support those goals. Once you, as a team, figure out what your goals are, the next thing to do is to set some guidelines on what that process should be. So this is where I think most teams, they kind of fall apart or they are unhappy with it, because there might be a process, but everybody has a different understanding of what that process is. And so it's a very good idea to get on the same page very early on, to say these are our guidelines, and they could be as simple as what are our blocking versus our non-blocking issues, meaning if you're reviewing code and you see this particular thing, you're allowed to say, you need to fix this before I approve it, or this is something small, it can still go through. Or things like, how many approvers do we need for something to go through? And even something as simple as actually spelling out what that process is another good thing to have in your guidelines. And then the last thing I'll say is, once you have those two and you start to actually enforce this process, the one thing you can take comfort in is that it's not set in stone. So like, a lot of folks think once this is the process, like it has to always be this way. But once you set these guidelines in something I call a team working agreement, basically you all say, this is what we're going to enforce as a team for our code reviews. If something's not working or if something is missing, then change it as a team, and change it so that it adapts to your team size, the type of project that you're working on. And just the core of this, again, is that you as a team has to talk a lot more, converse a lot more, and agree on a lot more. But then once you have those agreements and can put them in a public place like this team working agreement, then everything else tends to follow when you have those things. So there's way more than that, but obviously, as a very general like starting point, get together on your goals and then get together on your guidelines as a team.
Very cool. That's a very interesting way to put it together. Like you kind of like are thinking it from the perspective of team collaboration, and like how do you kind of like collectively as a team come up with, like, it's almost like your core values. What do you come up with, like your core values as what is most important for your team, and what is kind of like going to be making the biggest difference from a code review perspective. So maybe kind of like just double clicking on that. Um, I would want to also, this is something kind of like I've also written about, but I would love to take your perspective on. What do you think are the real value of code review? Like where exactly, why does the organization even need code reviews? I mean, like for instance, in many organizations, it's like, okay, we need code review for a compliance reason. And I think that's like a very baseline. Sure, you need it for compliance reason, but I would love to hear from your perspective. How should organizations think about establishing a code review culture? Like, what are some of the key areas that they should focus on?
For me, the my stance on this is that code reviews can be the chronicling or record keeping function of the team. And for me, for other teams, it may not be there. Like, I get a lot of pushback or debate that says, sure, that could be the place where we document that what's happening. But then, you get every take from, well, code should be self-explanatory, or comments are in the code, so you don't need to do reviews, or we have Jira and everything is there, or we have documentation in another separate place. And that's all. I agree with that to an extent. But the reason why I think code reviews are the best place for the baseline goal to be record keeping of what changes in your code base is that you have to do it anyway. Whether you automate that review portion out, which I don't agree with, we can get to that later with AI and everything, but whether you automate it or you take the human manual route and review that code, it's part of the software development process anyway. So why not use that forum to not only spread that knowledge across with your team, have a way to make your code better, because the whole function of the review is to ideally make the code base better, and then also have a very clear cut historical way of saying, these are why, this is how our code has changed and why. Like, this is how our code has changed. That can be answered with code comments, that can be answered with documentation. But let's face it, a lot of folks don't really do that consistently, or they also don't like writing documentation. So if you don't do that, it's almost like hooking into the task that we have to do anyway and making it better. So having that evolution explained, not just for yourself, but for new team members, I think that's the most important function of having code reviews. All the other things like knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, having folks be able to develop their critical thinking skills and understand the code, ability to ask questions with your teammate, the ability to make code maintainable and make sure it's scalable, and whatever other goals you may have while reviewing for code. Those are all like the ancillary benefits of it. But yeah, a lot of folks, they'll tend to say those are covered in other areas. So that's why I say the record keeping and chronicling of the whys is the most important part of code reviews, in my opinion.
That's interesting. This is the first time I'm kind of like hearing this perspective. Obviously, like, my perspective is more about knowledge sharing. It's kind of like, how do you reduce those knowledge silos in the organization where, especially like, as organizations are constantly changing, you kind of like still need a way through which like more people know it. Your bus factor is lower. You kind of like, more people understand the code base. And at the end of the day, like for me, one of the other perspectives of code reviews is how do you explain your thought process to somebody else? And kind of like I think maybe there is a little bit of overlap with record keeping there, because from this perspective is also like, as an author of a code review or like a code which was authored, uh, I am explaining how I'm writing the code, and that's kind of like how I'm representing it in a code review. And then kind of like I'm expecting other people will understand it when they're reviewing it. I think from record keeping perspective, maybe one thing I would want to challenge you on is, if you think about record keeping, maybe just the commit history is more important than the review part, or like how does that kind of like go hand in hand?
That's a great question. So, commit history, this is all points to the overall nature of the team and essentially how much they care. And this is like a hot take because everyone's like, there are a lot of folks that are like, it's a job, it's a paycheck. Like, I don't care enough to, be this software craftsman, craftswoman. Like, you have developers that are like that. There are some who are very, very much care about the code, who care about consistency, who care about code quality, who care about processes. And then most developers are kind of just like, it's good enough. I did my job. I completed my story. I completed my task. I was like that when I was younger and earlier in my career. I didn't really understand the benefits of thinking much more long term and thinking outside of my own individual contribution there of writing code. And let's face it, code, like when we write code, we're going to the point where we're not even writing code anymore. AI is writing code for us. So we spend a lot more time reading code. We spend a lot more time looking at it, analyzing it, seeing if it makes sense, than actually just spitting out code from our keyboards. So for the very nature that software developers have to read a lot more and understand a lot more, that should make maintainability, legibility, scalability, that should make all of those things way more important. So this all ties back to, you're saying commit history. Like, if you have a team that again cares and are consistent with their commit messages, and they actually explain the why in their commit messages, maybe they follow conventional commits, which I highly suggest and I am a fan of, like, then yes, you can take part of that responsibility and maybe make it less so on the code review and have it shared with the commits. So if you have a team that's like labeling them properly, having commits be atomic, you can see the story of how things have changed, you understand why things were changed through the commits, then you have very excellent commits. I commend you and your team if you're able to do that solely through the commits. But I think they work even better, I would say do that. Definitely have very clear and labeled commit messages that tell a story that are atomic, but then the code review is still there to kind of glue it all together. What is the why? What, like, the commit is saying what has changed, why did we change it? And that again is the most important part about the chronicling of it. It's more of the whys. Why did this change? What are the quirks? What are the decisions that led to this point? And in the code review, it's a much more official form of documentation than, say, some Google forms in a drive that nobody's going to look at, you know?
Fascinating. So essentially, you're saying is like commit history is probably still lacking because it's only one person's perspective. When we do a review, we are able to kind of like complete that story as part of like the review process to kind of like really understand deeply why the change was made.
Yes, to an extent. And I mean, not all commits have to be novels, right? I'm not saying you have to put everything in there to make it useful. Like sometimes you have commits that are chores, like you're updating the version, you're bumping up something, you are doing a small typo fix. Those don't need to be, you know, so impactful and have meaning in the commit. Like that's the commit, you know? So for that, there's that part of the commit that it takes care of, and then yes, to be able to share your perspective and what you've been working on to the greater team, I think is where the review fills in that gap.
Fascinating. Okay. I mean, obviously, like we're going to eventually get to AI as well. But for audience, obviously, folks who are not familiar with conventional commits, I'll put a reference of that in these notes so that like you can follow and understand like how they work. Um, Before we go into AI, I would want to at least understand like the value of code reviews, maybe when you're doing pair programming, right? Like there's code reviews and there's pair programming. Like if you're doing pair programming, one, do you even need code reviews? And two is like, does that actually like solve the same value? And like, can people actually still get to the same point when they're doing pair programming versus code reviews?
So I hear this a lot, and it's a very valid point in that, yeah, if you pair, then yes, you do have a way faster iterative review process built in there, right? So rather than just waiting for it asynchronously, one to one, you can kind of get that right there, and you can actually tackle that feedback in the moment, in the time that you're actually developing the code, and you probably develop a better solution for it too. And I'm all for that. Pairing is great. The problem is what you fall or what am I trying to say here? As an individual who works in the weeds of that particular feature or something, you're, you know, so focused on that, you're so focused in that aspect that when you do share it in a pull request or have a code review, that's now giving the opportunity for fresh eyes to look at it. So just because you add another person to it, you may have shared it with now one other person, but now it's just the two of you. Now it's just your own pieces of feedback, your little bubble that you have talked about in this code, and your decisions that are still they can still fall prey to being siloed to just the two of you. So in that same aspect, like you get the benefit of a quicker review cycle and you get that iterative feedback much faster, which is great. But I still feel that that code still needs to have the same benefits of having fresh eyes look at it, new eyes look at it, the rest of the team look at it, because they have not looked at it and they have not been in the weeds as you two may have, or they may have different experiences that might give you some fresh perspective on there. So the benefit there is just having new eyes and non, let's say, adjusted eyes that, you know, are used to the code already. How take a look at it with fresh eyes, that always gives a better review than if you were just looking at it from a background where you already kind of know what's happening in the code.
Interesting. I mean, I think but the reality is also, in large moving organizations, many people get bombarded with code reviews. And I actually also want to get to that is like, gated versus non-gated, like, especially like when it comes to code owners, where there might be hundreds of reviewers, not hundreds, maybe tens of reviewers that get assigned to some reviews. But even before that, uh, isn't it like always typically there's one to one, even when we are doing code review, that one person is writing, the other person is reviewing? Or do you think there is a better way of knowledge sharing that can involve more people?
I think that really depends on the team. I see a lot of developers who favor pairing because it's not just coming up with a solution to the immediate problem of what they're trying to code. It's also learning about how their teammate works. Like for example, they when people pair, they learn about a shortcut that they've never known about that could save them time in their development process. They learn about a tool their teammate is using that they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this existed. Or they learn there's so much more opportunity for them to teach each other outside of the code itself. There's all the ancillary parts about software development that they can benefit from. But in terms of the code review, I think it still stands that having a fresh look at the code is still warranted because at the end of the day, you do all have ownership over this code, and the more people that you can familiarize yourself that can familiarize themselves with that code, the better. So yes, in large enterprises or even larger teams where a lot of bottlenecks tend to come about because of code reviews, well, take a look at what those bottlenecks are. It's typically the way that the process is facilitated. Sometimes the code review or the reviews that are being asked, the code changes that are being asked to be reviewed are way too large. They're impossible for a single person to look at. Or they are only going through a small pool of reviewers. For example, a very common problem, it's a team and all reviews have to go through the senior developer because they're the most experienced, they're the most whatever, and every pull request has to go through them, now creating a bottleneck because they're probably overwhelmed with their own workload. Now they have to look at everyone's code, and there's no thinking like, does every review have to go through the senior? Like, there should be some thought behind there that says if this is something smaller, like a configuration change or something that doesn't truly need the expertise of the senior, spread that responsibility around. Let the mid-level or junior developers take control of that code review, because then you start to again expose that knowledge to the rest of your team. You start to get them more familiar with the code, and then by nature of doing that, rather than just forcing it through a single person, you naturally increase the reviewer pool size. That's like another problem is, oh, somebody gets assigned a pull request and I'm not familiar with that, so I can't give a proper review. And it's a valid point, right? You're like, but the thing is, the perspective of fresh eyes, even if you may not know what is happening in there, you should still use your skills as a software developer, what you generally know to be the principles of software development, to look for anything obvious, anything silly, anything, as in that isolation of what is being presented to you, you still have value in giving by giving it a review from your perspective and what may look weird or not common to you. And the last part I'll say about that is, if you always push off those pull requests, for example, by using the excuse, oh, I don't know this, let me assign it to someone else, like, when will you learn it? So I try to encourage, that's now like the other side of the spectrum there, that says take that as an opportunity to finally get familiar with it, and ask those questions of the reviewer, another reviewer, maybe add another reviewer and do the review together, so that the next time you are assigned a pull request, you don't have to push it off any longer. You can now become a contributing member and actually review the code.
Very cool. Okay, I mean, I guess I have to really do a shameless plug here. We have actually built a Flex Review product, which is focused around like collective ownership of the organization, where we assign reviews based on the type of the code that has been given, so that you can expand on knowledge sharing as well as like find the right experts for it. With that, I would want to at least like move into AI code reviews. I know we're running already a lot on time, last in time, so let's talk about AI, right? I mean, there is code written by AI, there is code reviewed by AI. What is your take? How is this going to evolve in the next few years?
My take is code reviews cannot be completely replaced by AI, like, and full stop. Even at today's rate, even with the improvements and LLMs and agents and everything that they are doing with AI, I still think that humans need to be part of the process. And I think, with all the code that is generated by AI, it's even more important for us, a human, to go take a look at that. And, when we talk about, things like GitHub Copilot or any of the other tools that may generate code for us, there's still that caveat there that says, make sure you review it, make sure it's correct, make sure it makes sense, make sure it's not hallucinating. So we have the tools, and please use them as a starting point, because at least in my experience and with what's available today, they can get you there they can get you like 80% of the way there. But if you know what you're doing.
Right.
So I'm sure there's a lot of talk about like what impact this has on, those starting out or junior developers who are only creating code through AI. Is that going to be a problem? I think it is. But yeah, I think the future is going to be AI and human collaboration, just like AI in general with everything else. Specifically for software development and code reviews, I think you can use AI to make the more mundane things faster. So generate a description of what is happening in your PR, generate the title, make those code suggestions, like let it do a first pass review. I'm for that. Let it look at your code, take a look and see if you have standards, code guidelines, style guides, formatting guides. Let that do the first pass and make those initial suggestions. And it should do that. That way, when the human comes in and does the second level review, the higher level review, I think that's where we have the most value, because we can let AI do all of that automation, all of the boring, low hanging fruit, and find those issues in a code review. That leaves time for us, the humans, to look for the things that it can't find. We can look for the things that, for example, a very common thing that I say is AI can make sure things are syntactically correct, that things are, compiling and all of those things. But a human can immediately tell that the code that you're using to try to get some data from a cache is calling from the incorrect cache. Like, how will an AI know that? It might get better and better as you train it over time, but that's like a very one, I think, very poignant example of how we as humans can immediately see that right away. So it's not that we shouldn't let AI take over. I very much see a future of collaboration where we let AI take care of the mundane and the superficial level stuff, and then we step in and actually use our brains to give the nuance, to give the human understanding, and to give all of the aspects that AI doesn't have, and give the review that from our own perspective and our own eyes.
Right. I mean, there's like a lot of things to unpack there. Like, I also strongly believe, like, AI code review, it'll probably be more useful from an Gen AI perspective, that in future, a lot more code might be generated by AI, but you still need humans to actually, as you said, to actually like do that supervision, to actually do that review, to actually be the guardian to make sure things that just don't like fall apart. Um,
Absolutely. In
yeah,
5 years, we can do a catch up episode, and maybe I'll be wrong and everything is great and it actually can reason as well as us. Then I'll go, I was so wrong 5 years ago, Ankit. Let it take over everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, it might not even be 5 years. I mean, I do believe that things will get better, but at the end of the day, it's really going to be hard to completely remove human from the loop.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I'm not saying that we can't fully automate it, but definitely at this point in time, yes, humans are certainly needed.
So there's also like this paradigm which I've been kind of like noodling with. Love to hear your opinions on that, which is, linters versus code review, right? So kind of like a lot of these things that code reviewers point out many times is like, should that be a linter? And I would love to hear kind of like how you think about it, and how do linters play a role into it, and do we expect like maybe linters will get smarter, maybe they will start using AI, maybe those things get detected even further left in the review cycle.
Absolutely. I have a whole chapter dedicated on this. It's automation in code reviews. And even though it's not automation during the code review, I say this: if there's anything that you can take care of during development, do it. Do it then. And that includes things like linting, things like formatting, styling, or any other items that can be caught with a linter. I am so for having that caught before the code review because, like you said, that's like the bane of a lot of developers' existence. Is I don't know if you've ever gotten a code review like that before, where you have 28 comments and it's like spacing, indentation, missing semicolon. Like, I'd rather have my computer tell me that or see those squiggly lines. I would fix it any day that time rather than having somebody tell
Right.
me to do that as a comment, like 28 comments. So, yes, anything that can be automated away, anything that can use rules or guidelines to be enforced automatically, I am absolutely in support of, because then it takes away, again, the low hanging fruit, the stuff that tends to become bottlenecks in a code review, the things that are annoying, the things that aren't high value. Those are the things that, if you can automate them away or take care of them before the code review, should definitely be done.
Interesting. Okay. I know we're coming close to time, so I at least want to cover one topic, which is obviously a debated topic all the time, which is metrics.
Hmm.
Um, can you share a little bit more about like your perspective on metrics specifically around code reviews? There's like things like time to review, number of comments. There's like many metrics that historically at least has been measured. First is like, should these metrics even be measured? And is there like kind of like even a thought process behind measuring quality of code reviews? Like, how do we even kind of like know as an organization, are we even doing code reviews which are good quality? So kind of like just share a little bit more collective perspective on metrics and quality.
Absolutely. Yeah, yes, metrics should be captured. However, they should not be used to tell the whole story. And as with any metric can be gamed. So as long as teams understand this, like, measure everything that you want to. So diving down deeper into that, to take a look at how your code reviews are doing. Maybe you are measuring, I've seen GitHub actions that say this is how large, like, it estimates how large a PR is and how long it might take to review. It captures stats on how many pull requests somebody has reviewed. Like you said, how many comments were left, how quickly did they review it, how quickly did they get that into production. And those are all good metrics to have, but I think you need to look at them as they change over time. The really big problem I see is that people use these metrics, but then when they see something that they don't like, they tend to either improperly tie that to the performance of a specific developer, or you have developers that game the system. So if you're measuring a metric like, lead time to deployment, or changes, how quickly do you get a change into production? Well, that has the problem, like you mentioned in your blog post. If that's what people are being measured on and they're only looking at that, or very matter of factly, like they just look at that number and that's what you're judged on, then yes, developers are absolutely going to go, oh yeah, looks good to me, not even look at it, because they know that they're being judged not by the quality of the review, but by how long it takes them to perform that review. Or same thing, if you're measuring people on how many PRs did they do. No, you might have people gaming the system. Even though I'm all for having pull requests that are smaller, again, developers might take that to the next level. If you're using these metrics improperly, they might do very, typo PRs, one typo fix per PR, or make, again, game the system, open a PR just for the sake of opening a PR so that they blow up their statistics and it looks good. So in those instances, obviously, I do not support that. What I instead support is take all of these metrics, take a look at them over time, month to month. So let's say you're recording how long overall as a team, how long it takes your team to review code. How long does an average review take? And take that number month over month over month. And do you start to see a trend? Are you going faster? Are you going slower? Are you staying the same? And then with that information and using metrics in that way, now you can make a decision. If you're going faster, great. Maybe there's nothing to change. Things are working fine and it seems to be great. If things are stagnant and they're within a pace that you would, rather make quicker, then maybe you start to look at your code review process. Why is it taking so long? Is it the CI/CD process? Is it a specific few people who are taking longer than the rest? Are there reasons? Are there multiple projects happening, or change in priorities that make it that may explain why these metrics are being tracked that the way that they are. It's that way of using metrics is something that I still think we could do way better on, and that's what I'll say. Take the metrics, but look at them over a period of time, and then make a decision on that rather than just the bare metric themselves.
Amazing. All right. I know code review is a topic we can go on forever, but unfortunately, we are at time. So, thank you so much, Adrienne, for this amazing conversation. I will definitely link the your book in the show notes so people can find it. But yeah, thank you so much for it, and hopefully, folks here learn a little bit more about code reviews and probably can go and improve some of the experience for their organization.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And if anyone else has any questions, I could talk about this all day. So feel free
Yeah.
to find me on LinkedIn or on Blue Sky. I'll be happy to answer your code review questions.
Amazing. We'll also link your socials so that people can find you. Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Bye
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.